All right, hey folks, I'm Jesse Paul here at the Colorado Sun, the author of the unaffiliated newsletter, which comes out on Tuesdays and Fridays, and a politics reporter here at the Sun. I cover the Capitol and Congress and state government and kind of everything you could possibly imagine. And we've got a pretty exciting event here for you. We're really excited to have this conversation. So uh, you obviously know what's coming. We got Governor Jared Polis, who's thankfully joined us over here, and four state lawmakers. This is the Colorado Sun's second annual such event ahead of the legislative session, which resumes on Tuesday. Pretty exciting times. Lawmakers have a lot to tackle between the coronavirus pandemic and a big slate of Democratic policies that are on the agenda. This event is great because it's really part of what the Colorado Sun is all about. A really big part of our mission to bring people closer to their lawmakers and to the governor, and to kind of explain the lawmaking process and give people an idea of how kind of everything shakes out. And this year, our theme ahead of the legislative session appropriately is lawmaking during coronavirus, which has really just changed so much at the Capitol, just like it's changed so much in all of our lives. So the Colorado Sun, just in case y'all aren't familiar with us, we're a journalist-owned news organization based here in Denver, but we cover the entire state. We're really excited. We're growing our staff right now. We've got 3 or 4 or 5 different people that we're about to hire in all different kinds of areas. I want to welcome TiVo, who's going to be covering politics with me at the state capitol. And again, this is just a great time for our news organization. We've got thousands of members. Our audience is growing every day. This is we're well into our 3rd year at the Sun, and this will be our 3rd legislative session that we're covering. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us, for making events like this possible. For those of you who aren't members yet, please join us over at coloradosun.com/join. And sign up as a Newsletters Plus member, and you can get the unaffiliated and get behind the scenes information about the Colorado political landscape twice a week. We work really hard on that to kind of bring you stuff that you can't find anywhere else. Thanks again so much to our 4 state lawmakers who are going to be joining us tonight for agreeing to participate. Thanks again to Governor Jared Polis for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us as well. And a big thanks to Aponte and Bussam, public affairs consultants, for sponsoring tonight's event. If you have questions during this event, please send them over to us at questions@coloradosun.com, or you can drop them right down in the chat section. We're going to be monitoring them, and they'll be sent over to Seth and I, and we'll relay them over to the governor and the lawmakers. Thanks to Seth Maskett, my co-host, Professor Seth Maskett, for agreeing to participate in another Colorado Sun event. The University of Denver has just been a great partner to the Sun. Seth runs the Center for American Politics, which has held more than a dozen events and panel discussions ahead of the 2020 election. And Seth recently published a book called Learning from Loss, the Democrats 2016 to 2020, about how the Democratic Party learned from its defeats to claim victory this November. And Seth is just a great source. I really look forward to chatting with him about internal policy debates within the Democratic Party in Colorado and nationally. And you'll have a chance after we speak to Governor Jared Polis to ask Seth and I some questions about politics. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Governor Jared Polis to present his big idea for the 2021 lawmaking term. We don't know what he's going to talk about, so we're excited to hear it. Elected in 2018, Polis is a Democrat. He's entering his 3rd year of his first term, and he's going to give us a good preview of what he's going to talk about, I hope, next week at his State of the State event. So Governor Jared Polis, I'll hand it off to you. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, and I'm excited to join you virtually. Thank everybody at the Colorado Sun family, DU, for hosting this. It was a great event in person last year. I'm sure it'll be in person again next year, but we can reach folks in the comfort of their own home and safety of their own home, and we're excited to do that. Today I'm going to share my big idea about how to make Colorado a better place for everyone. And what that is it's what we do with a one-time stimulus. So for complicated reasons that I won't get into here, the state has a one-time carry forward funds. We have the ability to do a one-time stimulus of $1 billion plus amount, while also in our budget, for instance, having record reserve levels and being prudent. This is not money that we have year after year. It's one-time money. And what we do with it matters. Economics matters. So we're really looking at how we can take great ideas from all sides of the aisle that meet a few criteria. One, the stimulus funds need to be deployed. It needs to be over 12 months spent, right? Like, is it shovel-ready infrastructure is a go-to example, but there's many, many more. Over 12 to 18 months max, ideally 12. and not have an ongoing component. In fact, not only not have an ongoing component, many of the things that would be great stimulus have an ROI. They save money. Think of, for instance, weatherization of buildings upfront. You can calculate the ROI. Maybe it's a 5 or 6% ROI, right? Maybe it's lower than the cost of capital. That would be an accretive thing to do, creating jobs now, operational efficiencies over time. Second, it needs to have that multiplier effect in the economy. And so different things have different multiplier effects. We have a whole discipline of economics, a very capable budget director, Colin Larson, but we also rely on outside analysis. And you want, for instance, if you're doing a direct transfer payment, upping SNAP or upping UI for low income, it's more likely to be spent in stimulative if it's folks that are going to spend it instead of just stick it in a bank account. So how do you look at kind of that, how stimulative is an item that you look at too? Great opportunities, and frankly, over the last year, we've all felt the impacts of the pandemic, and the legislature really stepped up in the special session and passed some great help for those who need it, tax relief for restaurants and small businesses, direct assistance, food banks, social safety net. This is kind of a bigger version of an opportunity to do a stimulus that builds Colorado back stronger, right? Leaves a legacy of increased productivity and growth, helps those most impacted, which also can be stimulative to go out and buy things from our stores and restaurants. And I think there's a great bipartisan opportunity to really grow on that. This is a once in a generation opportunity. I mean, never, the way the state budget works, we would never contemplate having $1 billion in one-time funds. It just doesn't usually happen. I mean, we'll be back up against the tabor limit in a few years. There'll be just operational things to fund, but we have this kind of one-time opportunity where there are one-time funds that we can use. We really can't use them to grow the base or ongoing, but we can really do transformative investments now. Look, in Colorado, we know our state pocketbook is not as big as Congress. So we should target the investments for maximum return. We know that we should do what we can do in the state. And our initial proposal includes obvious investments, infrastructure, transportation. Some of it is that to help us catch up, shovel-ready projects today, good jobs, less traffic, rural road rehabilitation, wildlife migration corridor enhancements, which reduce traffic and collisions, Denver Metro West I-70 bridge repair, Eisenhower tunnel upgrades, $70 million for our Department of Transportation's Revitalizing Main Streets program. That's a very exciting program. We've just had a few million in it to date, but I've got to see some of what it can accomplish in Grand Junction and other areas. It funds downtown improvements, locally driven, and we're very grateful to the legislature. The JBC already took action on part of that request, and we look forward to doing more when they return the following week. And of course, strengthening connectivity, broadband. I mean, if there's one thing this pandemic taught us, as if we didn't know before, how important is being interconnected. But it's important after the pandemic for telecommuting, for rural economic growth. We're proposing about 120 million, connecting about 30,000 or more homes to high-speed internet. Welcome them to the 21st century and being able to really participate in our economy. And building on the 20 million for broadband to students, we're also looking at additional middle mile infrastructure to help, again, jobs today, ready to get to work, connectivity for the long term. And of course, investing in our people. As an example, is a proposal, 40 million for upskilling, helping Coloradans to get retrained or reskilled to get better jobs in the future, right? How can we help more Coloradans get out of the hourly economy, $12, $14, $15 an hour to get a professional economy, benefits. What's the skills gap? Good for the private sector. We need great people, talented people, good for the individuals. Often cost is a deterrent. Now's a great time to invest in that. So we could go on and on. It's a really exciting time, but how we use this $1 billion will really, I think, reflect on this legislature, on me, on the state, on all of us. It's a one-time opportunity that no recent legislature has had that can really put our mark on the state. Transformational around equity, around building our future, around prosperity, around recreation, expanding parks and for our own enjoyment and for tourism. Really a lot of great opportunities. And the pandemic, of course, has been tough. And as we look to bolster our economy and rebuild, we want to see how we can build back even stronger. And these stimulus proposals aren't just the right thing to do. They're the right for ourselves. They're the right thing to do for our legacy and for the future benefit of Coloradans in 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, to make Colorado the best place to live your life and raise a family and start a business, all right here in Colorado. So I look forward to working with our partners in the legislature with great ideas from both sides of the aisle to make sure that we get the best and highest return, short term, medium term, long term, from this unique opportunity that we have in this session of the General Assembly. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Governor. I appreciate it. So $1 billion is a lot of money, and I think folks remember hearing that the state government was in a big hole and that we didn't have much money. Where is this $1 billion coming from? Is this federal government money? And yeah.
So it's complicated, but the main thing is we still have a structural deficit, meaning we have deficits in future years. And by the way, we want to also tuck away $1 billion plus. The total size of the one-time funds is over $2 billion, but we want to reserve that to fund the structural deficit in year 2 and 3. But we also know there'll be less of a structural deficit if we get back to economic growth sooner. Investment now can accomplish that. And the short answer, I guess, for why we have it is we, working with the JBC and the legislature, we're very prudent fiscal managers in the sense that we prepared, rightly so, for a much worse scenario economically than what happened. That was absolutely prudent to do. We didn't know how bad the economy would get or how long the pandemic would last. So because of that planning work, there's a 1-year carry forward that we can now use to jumpstart our recovery and build a legacy for Colorado's future.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you're going to win support from the legislature in order to spend this money the way you want to? I know that when this proposal went before the Joint Budget Committee, there was initially, I guess, a pause hit by the members of the Joint Budget Committee and sending it to the legislature and wanting them to look more at these proposals and have more of a say. Do you think that lawmakers will match your desires for how this money is spent?
So first will be the work around defining the amount of money, and reasonably so. While I think the legislature and the Joint Budget Committee, being fiscally prudent, can agree to a certain amount right away, they also, and we also, and everybody wants to kind of see, an additional forecast, the March forecast, et cetera, for potentially an additional pot of stimulus money, which we feel is there, but people want to verify that before committing it. But there's certainly a pot that all parties agree on, ready to go. How we use it, we're very open. Again, the criteria are, it's got to be a stimulus, right? I mean, it can't be something that isn't even ready to be built for 3 years. It's got to be now, over 12 to 18 months, transformational in what it can achieve, economic multiplier effect. And there's going to be great ideas, I think, from both sides of the aisle. There already are. We put some out there, legislators can put some out there, but there's no shortage of ideas. It's really about how we can get the best bang for our buck. I mean, that's going to be our focus. We'd love if people come up with better ideas with greater multipliers and greater transformational impact than the ones we've came up with. There's no pride of ownership. We hope that people come up with the very best ideas for Colorado on how to take advantage of this amazing opportunity that we have this session.
I'll ask one more question, then I want to hand it over to Seth. But Republicans were very critical of how you spent federal coronavirus aid money back when the pandemic first began and the first version of the CARES Act came through. Are you bringing them on board to work with you on how to spend this $1 billion, or is this mostly Democrats deciding where this money is being funneled?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, when you say Republicans are upset about how I spend it, there's two definitions of the word how. So they're upset, some of them, not all of them probably, but some of them, with the manner that I use to spend it. I don't think they're very upset with how I spent it, meaning what we sent it to, because we didn't do anything fancy with it. I mean, it went to schools and higher ed. And, I'm sure maybe every person would have a slightly different priority. So I don't think Republicans are upset with how we spent it, if you use the normal, but they are upset with perhaps the way that I did it, working with the JBC Democrats. Look, we work with the majority party, obviously. We want to pull in the minority. I encourage the state House and the state Senate to incorporate ideas from the minority party in the one-time stimulus funds. Absolutely. I think we get a better product. I think that the special session was a good model for that. There was good bipartisan sponsorship of most of those bills. This is not the same in that it's not fully baked. I mean, we have a range of dollar amounts. We have some ideas, but it's wide open for ideas from legislators from both parties. And I think a great opportunity for members of both parties to really take a look themselves in the mirror and say, what do we want? How do we view our state? And how can we take this opportunity for yes, stimulus, yes, jobs, but also transformation?
All right, Seth, I'll hand it over to you to ask some questions now.
Governor, thanks for doing this event. I just to follow up a little bit on those questions, I was curious. We know the federal government is currently working on its own stimulus package right now that will likely end up in excess of $1 trillion. I was hoping you could just give us a sense of what the package you're proposing right now would do that the federal government stimulus would not.
Yeah, so we absolutely want to look at what holes exist and what it does. So the federal government is a lot more. We could never do anything like send everybody $1,400, right? I mean, you remember we struggled, we found the money, but we did a one-time payment, our state, of $375 to, like one in 12 people in our state. It was to 400,000 people who'd experienced unemployment. That was like the most we could do. That was a big deal, right? And we did that, and I'm proud we did it because we met a gap federally when a lot of folks who had suffered unemployment didn't have any federal benefits because Congress couldn't get their act together. So I think it's great if they send folks $1,400, exactly where the cutoff is, they'll determine, but the general concept is good. I absolutely support a lot of the work they're doing around testing and vaccination, support for our schools to reopen. So a lot of these big ticket items, what they're not drilling down to is the level of thing that we're talking about here, like how do we revitalize downtown Pueblo and build safe outdoor areas that people can enjoy for generations to come? How do we reach 30,000 more homes with broadband in Garfield County and Rio Blanco County? How can we upskill our workers and make sure that we have a targeted program through our community colleges where people that are out of work can get a real marketable job skill and then earn a higher salary with the full dignity of being able to support themselves with work. So I'm very supportive of what they're talking about federally. And I think that what we can do in Colorado gives us a leg up over other states who don't do anything, who just take the federal stimulus and that's it. So we can build a competitive advantage, a comparative advantage by building upon whatever the federal government does and doing something that's Colorado specific.
Can I just jump on that, on your last point there? How would you compare Colorado's response overall to the coronavirus with that of other states? I mean, obviously we know a lot of different states made some mistakes early on, but are there things that Colorado should have done better? Or are there things that you think Colorado has done better than other states?
I mean, overall, it's a balancing act. I don't fault any governor for the decisions that they know. I think the numbers speak pretty well that we've done, the most in Colorado. It's important to note that America has done very poorly. I mean, and we have as a national response, and I've at times, and I know many other governors of both parties have expressed frustration of the lack of a better coordinated national response, especially under the previous administration. Hopefully that's on the way. We've saw a middle ground, right? I've been skeptical of some of the kind of lockdowns and closures that some states like California have done, which I think not only grates on people's patience, but don't really contain the virus because people go out anyway. So we were proud of one of the shortest shutdown periods, and moving pretty quick with reopening restaurants. On the other hand, we're a state that is doing something. There's some states that literally took very few measures, left it entirely to mayors to kind of be the bad guys, didn't embrace mask wearing, and had higher case counts quicker. Look, it's a pandemic. So we've been very clear about defining success from the start. The way that we define it is I will take the actions necessary to avoid overwhelming our hospital system. And I mean, what a low bar, but still that's what we can accomplish in a pandemic. Why? Very important. Because not only people with COVID die at increased rates when the hospital system's overwhelmed, but people with heart attacks, with strokes, cancer, you name it, appendicitis. So several states, I want to say on both sides, in the sense that some states that weren't restrictive enough and some states that were overly restrictive and kind of backfired, states in both of those categories literally overwhelmed their hospitals. and had crisis standards of care and gurneys in hallways and people with non-COVID conditions did die at higher rates because they weren't given the same quality of care. We avoided that. So in a pandemic, that being what I set out to accomplish, we did accomplish that. It ain't over yet. It ain't over yet. We're protecting our most vulnerable very rapidly. More than a majority of people 70 and up have already received their first vaccination, moving on to 65 to 69. But we're not there yet, and we've got to keep it up the next couple months.
Governor, I know when you first proposed this, you talked about thousands of jobs being created by this stimulus plan. Where are you getting those numbers from? I think Coloradans and maybe some lawmakers are looking at it a little skeptically. Like, where are there going to be jobs that there aren't now? And yeah, we'll start with that one.
Yeah, first of all, this is a scientific economic exercise, not a political one. So the numbers don't come from me. They come from our great budget team and economic analysis. So you take something like infrastructure, what is the project that's going to bid out, about how many private sector jobs it creates in a given amount of time. It's never exact, but it's within a reasonable margin of error. And you can absolutely, I mean experts who are economists who do this can absolutely look at on an expenditure by expenditure basis the short-term and medium-term job creation. What's always a little more fuzzy to measure, but still worth projecting, is the long-term economic impact, right? That's, you can have, what do you say, you get 3 economists in a room, you'll get 5 opinions, but all 5 are worth looking at. And so we do, of course, want to look at that long-term impact as well. But very specifically, I would put a high level of trust in those short-term numbers of job creation. They're not going to be exact, but they'll be pretty close.
I think the number that your administration threw out there was about 15,000. Do you think that that'll hold true?
I believe that was based on a lower stimulus amount before the additional amount came in. So we'll update that and share that if we haven't already, and it could very well be in one of our budget letters with the press and legislative stakeholders. And obviously it depends on exactly what we do with the stimulus. But I think it's north of that if you're talking about $1 billion stimulus. But that was a number that was out there at this point, and I just can't tell you exactly which stimulus that was attached to, because there's several parts here, right? Special session, right? JBC moved through some of those items, and some of them will require bills, policy, and will be done with the full body of the General Assembly. So I think one thing that we'll do, it'll be helpful for me, also for the general public, will be to put sort of all of the stimulus stuff, no matter how it was, and we did some ourselves with executive actions. Remember the $375 one-time payment? That was something the executive was able to do. So we can sort of bottle all this stuff together and say, here it is. And then we can look at the effect of all of it, because it's done in different ways at slightly different times. And so we're happy to, give you the best data we have on each of those pieces.
Okay, and one last question about this package before we want to get to a few other options. But I know that you mentioned the JBC passed some of these things, some parts of the stimulus package very quickly. Other ones, I know you guys came to the agreement to push it to the legislative session. Are you worried that by moving these things down the road, by starting them later, that it'll slow Colorado's response to economic recovery from the pandemic?
So it's my understanding that legislative leadership wants to focus on this pretty soon out of the gate, which is good. So the answer is no, as long as it's done expeditiously. If it was like the last thing done in session at the end of May, you'd really miss out on a lot of opportunities. So I feel confident that the leaders of the legislature, and I really want to make sure that they put their imprint on this. They understand the urgent nature of it. As I said, I hope for nothing more than that Republicans and Democrats come up with even better ideas with better multipliers that are more transformational than some of the initial items we proposed. The items we proposed are also, they're really across state government. We really asked the subject matter experts in each area, come up with your best ideas in this agency and that agency. They were then analyzed by the budget office, our budget director, Colin Larson, great job. I mean, she worked for OMB under the Bush administration. It's a analytic, nonpartisan process. I mean, it's not where you build the wish list of either party. It's where you do the best possible multiplier and impact create the most jobs from the ability you have to invest. So we're excited to work on it. I think as long as it's worked on expeditiously by the legislature, I don't think we suffer from any delay.
Governor, I was hoping to ask you a little bit of just more generally about the political environment. We know politics in Colorado and indeed across the country has become a lot more polarized in recent years. We've even heard from some Weld County conservatives who are talking about secession. Even if that's unlikely, do you have concerns that either this stimulus plan or your overall agenda or the overall Democratic agenda could alienate conservative parts of the state? How do you seek to avoid a backlash this year?
Well, this national divide, it really saddens me, like it does most Americans. I was watching horror the events of January 6th, and I like to think that we're better than that in Colorado. I think we did demonstrate that in our special session where Republicans and Democrats came together to meet the need. I really think there's a huge opportunity to also do that with the stimulus, to kind of put the markings of the best ideas from both sides of the aisle on a key piece of legislation that unites us rather than divides us, right? When we talk about broadband, it's empowering rural areas. When we talk about support for the ag supply chain, we talk about potential investments in stock shows, state fairgrounds. I think these are things that can excite everybody in Colorado. And I think that's going to be important too. It's really about how our state can emerge together in a stronger position than we were before the pandemic.
Well, Governor, some liberal groups that I've talked to and interested at the Capitol have asked that Democrats push really hard on policies over these next 2 years in order to, I guess, as an insurance policy against a bad 2022. I wonder if you're thinking about that at all, if you feel like, these next 2 years, you guys really have to get some stuff done just in case you lose control of, the state Senate or the state House with redistricting and potentially even your seats up for election as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not how I think. I don't think it's how most Democrats or Republicans think. I think the way maybe pundits think that way, political pundits. I think what we think about is there's a urgency of this time, recovering from the pandemic, to be able to create a great catalyst for positive change, right? Like, what better time to be aggressive to save people money on healthcare? We passed reinsurance in my first year, reduced rates by 20% in the exchange. Guess what? There's more people in the exchange now because less people have employer backed healthcare. So there's record numbers that have enrolled, all taking advantage of that 20% savings. How do we take those next steps? How do we rein in out of control prescription drug costs, right? We know the problem. We know we're getting ripped off. We're already have an RFP out on importing from Canada. That's part of it. That's a small part of it. That'll hopefully be some, but there's a lot more to do. How do we provide more options and choice, like a Colorado option in insurance? Many Coloradans have only one choice in the insurance market. So a lot of great ideas. They're urgent because of the times. They're not urgent because of the political calendar.
So you mentioned the public option. Last year, obviously, you weren't able to get that done, in part because of the pandemic, but there was a lot of political opposition to that, particularly from hospitals. The atmosphere has changed a lot, right? I mean, the hospitals now are top of mind. People respect healthcare workers probably more than they ever have in the history of this country. And it sounds like the public option is coming back. Do you think that there's going to be the political capital this year at the Capitol to get that done? What barriers do you see potentially to getting that across the finish line?
Boy, what an amazing job our hospitals, their workers have done in this pandemic, meeting the need. But also, one of the reasons that Colorado is in the top tier of states with regard to vaccination percentages is really by working through the hospitals. They're not the only game in town. It's also pharmacies, grocery stores, community health clinics, but our workhorses running UC Health running a 10,000 people at Coors Field, SCL running at the Western Complex 5,000. UC Health will be down in Colorado Springs this weekend, Centura. I mean, really just coming through time and time again, often at cost to themselves. So, I hope they're certainly at the table on all the discussions around a Colorado option. But I know that Coloradans want more choice, and I think that over the long term, we'll all benefit from that, as will our providers.
And one last question. I'm going to hand it over to Seth in a second, but I think we're going to hear a little bit about this later in the program. But Republicans throughout the pandemic have been trying to roll back some of your emergency powers, or at least provide some legislative check on those. I wonder what your thoughts are. I don't know if we've heard directly from you about those efforts. During the special session, I think there were multiple bills. They all died in the Democratic-controlled state House. What's your response to those efforts by Republicans to kind of provide a check on what you've been doing?
Yeah, I think it's important that people realize that this will affect future governors more than it affects, Jared Polis. So it's really about the balance between the legislative and executive branch in dealing with emergencies. We have a part-time legislature, and that's going to certainly be part of it. I think if you had a full-time round-the-year legislature, you could have more of a real-time process around emergency response. But unless you plan to switch to that, you really have to have an executive who has that ability. With Bill Owens and the fires when he was governor, every governor has faced this, where there simply isn't time to call in others and go through a process around a urgent response. And this is a pandemic, and it's no different than those. The next one won't be a pandemic. I mean, hope not, right? I mean, we don't know. It could be, floods, fires. Those are whatever it is. So it's a good, thoughtful discussion to have. I just encourage Republicans to realize they're not talking about Jared Polis here. They're talking about future governors. I mean, this could be 10 years, 20 years. Who knows when the next really horrific thing is? I don't think they're coming after me for, on one fire, two. I mean, what we need to do in a normal year. I think they're really talking about kind of the flooded 2013 type of events. So, and I don't think the state is ready to go to a full-time legislature. I mean, but again, if that's something that they're interested in, year round, and presumably they'd have to be paid more and not have other jobs and all that. Some states have that. Other states have legislatures that come in once every 2 years, right? And that works for them too. We're kind of in the middle, about 5 months a year, 4 months a year.
So, Governor, just sort of return to one of the themes of this event. You started office in 2019. You had a pretty productive legislative session that year. You were able to, enact a number of the things you ran on. Your second year in office was almost totally dominated by the coronavirus pandemic. It's obviously affecting your, at least part of your third year as well. And I just was hoping you could give us a sense of what has had to sort of go by the wayside as a result of this pandemic. What policy priorities have you had to let slide simply because of this emergency? And what have you done about that?
Yeah, I mean, it really didn't delay my main goals. I'm pretty simple. I always say the bold four, right? So saving people money on healthcare, reinsurance, we got that done. We want to make progress on drugs and Colorado option. Perhaps it delayed that discussion a little bit, but not much. Early childhood education, our preschool initiative passed with 67% of the ballot. I mean, it was just such a great honor for me to see, Republicans, Democrats, Independents all saying Coloradans should be able to go to preschool. It's rare that anything can bring together 67% of folks in this day and age. And that's going to be my personal favorite bill to sign, of course, will be the implementation bill. The hard part was the funding. That's already been done by the voters, but the implementation of that. But that's one of the reasons I ran for governor, right? Full day kindergarten, universal preschool, getting that done is a big deal. Renewable energy certainly hasn't slowed us down. In fact, in some ways, it's accelerated it. Some of the meta trends about the new normal with more telecommuting. Obviously, the election of President Biden helps on electric cars and electrification. So having allies in Washington. And then on reforming our tax code, I was glad to see the tax cut pass at the ballot box, and certainly look forward to working with legislators on additional steps and holding the state harmless from revenue losses and making sure that we can support those who need it the most. So I don't think it's affected much of those, other than that perhaps the public isn't paying as much attention, but that's certainly my wheels to the grindstone on all of the things that I ran on and getting them done.
Governor, you just mentioned renewable energy and the environment, which I know is something that you ran on back in 2018, and it's a huge part of your administration. But environmental groups have been somewhat critical of how fast or how not fast your administration has moved on some of these issues. What is your response to those groups? I think some of them have filed lawsuits and really been pushing you guys to work harder and quicker on climate change.
Look, I mean, I'd rather that they didn't sue me, of course, but I mean, I get it. Their job is to be activists. Their job is not to govern, and they need to have a reason to whatever I do. You want more. I mean, it's a job of an activist. I totally understand that. I'm extremely proud of what we've accomplished. I ran on a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2040. We have largely locked in, meaning more than 99% of production now in our state. Utilities, tri-state, Excel, rural electric co-ops, you name it, 80% by 2030. So there's a few technical steps that have to take to formally lock it in for Black Hill and some others, but 80% by 2030, that really puts you on track for 100% by 2040. And we're able to do that in 2 years to lock that in. And we have some utilities even going above and beyond. We have Holy Cross 100% by 2030, right? And you have very aggressive plans by Excel and others. So it's been exciting. It's been even faster progress than frankly I would have thought. Maybe my more optimistic self would have thought that, but it's exciting to see. We're in the forefront, leading the way, cleaner air, good green jobs, and saving money for consumers.
Well, we have some reader questions here that I'd like to pose to you. We'll only take a few more minutes of your time, so we appreciate so much your generosity here. One of our readers wants to know if there's any kind of healthcare part of your stimulus plan, if any of that money is going to go specifically to healthcare initiatives.
Yeah, that's hard because, again, you're looking at one-time investments. I think when you drill down a little bit, we do have a piece around behavioral health reform. It might be tied into legislative efforts around behavioral health reform. This was another, we convened a multi-stakeholder behavioral health reform task force. We need better mental health support services in Colorado. They just need to be aligned better. There's so many disparate programs and different agencies. And when somebody is in need of help, it's the hardest possible time to navigate some complex bureaucracy. So how do we streamline, make it more efficient? Some one-time investment piece. It's a modest. I mean, you're talking, a few million. It could potentially be something that ties into efforts to improve behavioral health. But most health investments are not 1 year and done, and so they mostly don't fit the criteria for stimulus.
And just a reminder, if folks do have questions, you can email them over at questions@coloradosun.com, and they'll be relayed over to me. One of our readers wanted to know, and I know you addressed this the other day at a news conference, why isn't the state prioritizing people who are experiencing homelessness for the vaccines when they don't have jobs and they're living in congregate settings sometimes, whether it's shelters or encampments? Why have you decided not to prioritize those folks to receive the vaccine?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're over 65, you can get the vaccine today, whether you're homeless or not. We don't make any discrimination or difference whether you're a prisoner or homeless or a millionaire. It just doesn't matter. 65 and up can get the vaccine. And in fact, our prisoners 65 and up were among the very first people 65 and up to get it because they're easy to find. We know where they are, and we made that available. And I think that folks over 70 have gotten it, 65 and up getting it. Homeless, again, by age, by risk category, absolutely should get it. But if you're 23 years old, this is a much lower risk virus than if you're 70 or 80, and even if you're 40 or 50. So we want to make sure that we do that risk-based analysis and make it available to 65 and up, and as soon as we can expand it to 60 and up, rather than divert doses to more people that are at a lower risk for COVID. And somebody will say, oh, well, they're at a higher risk for getting COVID. Yes, but that pales in comparison to the clinical impact of being older, right? So sure, we have one in four Coloradans have gotten COVID, right? When 1,000 CU kids had COVID, there were zero hospitalizations. It just wasn't a big deal. If a retirement community of 40 people get it, you can have 6 die and 15 hospitalized. It's just that stark a difference by age risk and to a lesser extent by pre-existing condition. But age is a very good proxy, highly correlated with the clinical outcomes from COVID. And so that's been our largest guiding factor in making sure that we can reduce hospitalizations and save lives.
All right, Governor. Well, I'll ask you one last question, then we'll let you go. Somebody you know well is U.S. Representative Joe Neguse, who obviously took your seat in Congress. And America's really getting to know him this week because of the impeachment trial. And I know there's been a lot of talk nationally and in Colorado kind of about his meteoric rise. What do you see as Joe Neguse's future? Does he remind you a little bit of like a young Jared Polis in terms of getting into politics and moving up quickly? Are you kind of in that camp that believes like really the sky is the limit for this guy?
Well, you remember my predecessor in Congress was Mark Udall, who when he ran for Senate, I ran for him, was elected to his House seat. So he used to tell this story that he would go around and he was out as senator and somebody was raving about me and would end by saying, yeah, and that Jared Polis is so much better than the guy who took the place up, right? Not remembering Mark Udall. I'd say, I mean, it's clearly, I think, Joe is doing a far better job than his predecessor, no question about it. I held down the fort. It took me as an example, and I was proud to be in leadership, but it took me 6 years to get into leadership. And I was proud to be in leadership my final 2 terms. Joe Neguse got into leadership in his first term, and now he is in an elected leadership position here in his second term. And that really matters because you're at the table with the speaker, with the majority leader, the sort of the 14, 16 people that really matter that before it goes out to the caucus. I worked hard and clawed my way up, and Joe was able to do that much quicker and much more effectively. I think his CORE Act is on the way to becoming law, which I initially dropped, probably close to 10 years ago. I'm going to be so excited to protect over 400,000 acres of Colorado high country and wilderness, and Michael Bennett and Joe Neguse will get that across the finish line. So I think we've all been knowing about how amazing Joe is and his great potential. And I'm glad the nation gets to see a bit of that now.
Well, thank you so much, Governor. We really appreciate you giving us so much time this evening, and look forward to asking you some tough questions in the future. And again, thank you so much for all of your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, well, now we're going to move into the next portion of our event, where Seth and I will answer some questions from you all and ask each other some questions as well, because I love picking his brain, and he makes me smarter every time we have these conversations. It sounds like there's been some inappropriate comments been dropped in our Zoom chat, and we're going to stop taking comments over there. And if you have any questions, please send them over to questions@coloradosun.com. And our apologies for that. We don't have a way to moderate those. We're trying to turn those off. So obviously, anybody who's doing that, please cease, and you'll be removed from this event if you continue to do that kind of thing. So moving on now, Seth, I wanted to ask you some questions that I think you've addressed. I know in national media I've heard you talk about this, and and now we're talking about it all over Colorado, kind of switching gears outside of the Capitol. But Lauren Boebert, United States Representative, is really drawing a lot of headlines all over the country. And I wonder, from your view, if she's really defining the future of the Republican Party in Colorado, and maybe nationally. And I wonder how you're seeing state officials and national officials respond to her.
I mean, it's interesting to watch her career and that of some of her fellow freshmen, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and some others who have really sort of drawn a lot of attention to themselves in their run and in their first few days in Congress. It's interesting the way in the last session, we saw the U.S. House Republicans strip Steve King of Iowa of his committee positions because basically they found him an embarrassment. He was saying too many racist things for too long, and that just sort of ushered him out of the chamber. And now somewhat more bombastic people are coming in. It was interesting. I was talking with a reporter about Boebert recently, who was saying that she was trying to find, talk to some local Republican officials around the state about how they're feeling about her, whether they're supporting her or they're criticizing her. And a lot of people just weren't giving any statement at all. That is, they simply did not want to go on the record about her. Now, I'd say generally, if you're an office holder, if you're a freshman and you're looking to make a splash and people in your own party don't want to talk about you, that's probably not a good sign. But they could also just be sort of waiting and seeing, just how damaging is this? Is she still associated with, say, like the January 6th insurrection as time goes forward, or is she able to sort of define her other areas of interest? So I don't know that the party's looking to necessarily toss her aside and try and champion someone new for that district. But it's also not clear just how much support they're having for her right now.
So I want to ask you a question, I guess, about the Democratic side of politics in Colorado. Something interesting that's going on was former state representative Joe Neguse has been out there, Joe Salazar has been out there saying that he is considering a primary challenge to Michael Bennett in 2022. But progressives have really struggled in Colorado in terms of these primary challenges to incumbents. And the state's voters, I feel like, have sent us mixed messages, because back in 2020, we had the presidential primary, Bernie Sanders winning, and then John Hickenlooper winning, obviously, in the Senate primary. So how do you kind of square those interesting differing opinions?
So, the lesson from our presidential primary a year ago was honestly kind of a mixed one because, as you recall, we had a lot of early voting going into that. And so, a lot of Coloradans had already cast, a lot of Democrats had already cast their ballots for, a number, and Bernie Sanders did very well in that early vote. However, it ended up being that a lot of the key other candidates, Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, and some others dropped out right before the primary election day. So people had already cast votes for them. And it ended up, once, had the election just entirely occurred on that day, Biden probably would have won because the rest of that non-Sanders vote would have all converged. So anyway, not to get too technical, but my impression here is that, Sanders obviously has a strong presence here. There's a strong progressive presence. It's not necessarily a majority of Democratic primary voters, which is why I think we saw Hickenlooper do well. We saw, we've seen some previous statewide Democratic candidates, more moderate Democratic candidates, get some progressive pushback and challenges in primaries that rarely amount to all that much. So, it's certainly possible we could see something like that next year, see a pretty significant challenge. But my impression is Bennett's pretty popular. He's pretty well liked, in most Democratic constituencies. I don't know that there's necessarily a lot of fuel there for a primary challenge to him, but it's certainly a possibility. Can I ask you a question at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually want to ask you another question about 2022. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty, and you had brought this up in your question to Governor Polis about, we just don't know what's going to happen next year. We have a redistricting coming up. We have, some, potentially quite a few primary challenges on the Democratic side. We know that the president's party tends not to do that well in midterm elections. So I'm curious, from your conversations, how are Colorado Democrats thinking about 2022? Is this a cycle where they think it's a reasonable chance they could lose control of one or both chambers? Are they seeing this as kind of a last chance to make some changes?
I think Democrats realize that there's a real threat in 2022. I mean, it's just unclear what the districts are going to look like, both in the legislative and congressional side of things. I feel like Democrats are feeling better about the congressional map than the legislative one, but there's this feeling that in the primary sense, once these districts are redrawn, lawmakers who might be sitting next to each other at the state house might be primarying each other all of a sudden because they want to hold the same seat. So it'll be pretty fascinating to kind of see how that all shakes out. There's one reader question that I wanted to answer from Charles Van Thun, who was asking about what's the plan to help K-12 students, especially in poor districts, and students of color regain time and progress lost due to the pandemic. One of the biggest fights that we're going to see at the Capitol at the beginning is over standardized testing and whether or not to move forward with that in Colorado. Last year it was canceled because of the pandemic, and this year it's been decided that it at the very least will not be used for teacher evaluations or teacher performance. And there's a big debate that's going on about whether or not the test should go on in order to figure out how much learning's been lost in districts across the state. And it's split the Democratic Party in two. And Governor Jared Polis so far appears to be on the side of moving forward with the testing. And then on the other side are folks like Representative Emily Sirota, who would like to do away with it for this year. And of course, this gets into the testing debate. There's a lot of stimulus money that's going to broadband to help folks in like the San Luis Valley and Northeast Colorado access broadband. And there's an interesting proposal about mental health that's going to be dropped, I think, in the first couple of weeks of the session in order to try and help get kids feeling good about where they're at. Here's another question from a reader from Sienna Lloyd. With the pandemic and the economic strain, are there plans to further explore a state public option for health insurance? And the governor addressed this earlier on in our event. Yes, there is. They're going to try and bring that once more here in Colorado. And last year it failed, both because of political considerations and also because of the pandemic. It's a really big hurdle. There's a lot of interest at the Capitol that are trying to push back against it. And it's not clear there's actually enough Democratic votes to move forward with that bill. And it'll probably be one of the biggest fights of the session once again. So it'll be super interesting. Well, that section moved quickly, but I want to get to our distinguished guests, our 4 state lawmakers who are joining us, who are going to present their big ideas. And first up is Representative Colin Larson, fellow Colorado College graduate from Littleton. who's going to be presenting his big idea. And you're looking very outdoorsy there, Representative. I like the vest. Looks much more comfortable than what I'm wearing right now.
Yeah. I figured I'd take advantage of the year of the occasion of not having to be there in person and go a little casual. So
I appreciate it.
But yeah.
All right. Well, you got 5 minutes. Let's hear your idea.
Well, sure. So I'm bringing a little levity to it, but my idea is right here. This is it's admittedly not a to-go margarita, but my idea is to make to go and carry out liquor delivery from restaurants a permanent fixture of Colorado law going forward. So I was part of a bipartisan group of legislators, myself, Dylan Roberts, Kevin Prill, and Jeff Bridges, that helped pass a piece of legislation last cycle to temporarily allow restaurants to deliver alcohol along with their food for takeout and delivery. Initially, this was essentially a lifeline to restaurants which have just been totally decimated by the COVID restrictions. Being a quasi restaurateur myself, being a coffee shop owner prior to this, I understood that drinks obviously have a higher margin than food items. This would be a key to their economic survival. I think what we've learned in the last 10 months, since this has kind of been the law of the land on the ground, is that not only is any of the public safety issues that we thought might come about, like drunk driving increases, we haven't seen any of that stuff materialize. But what we've also seen is that people love it. It's very popular with consumers. People love to be able to, support their local restaurants. Dining habits may be permanently changed going forward, where people may just have a preference for takeout, and being able to get a cocktail to go is going to be part of the new normal. So the same band got back together this year, and we're looking at making this a permanent extension so that now restaurants will be able to deliver a to-go cocktail or beer with their food. So I'm hoping that, we're meeting a little resistance from some vested liquor interests, but I think we're going to be able to get there and frankly give the people of Colorado what they've enjoyed the last 10 months.
Thank you for that presentation. Thanks for joining us, Representative. I was hoping to ask you just a little bit on that last point about, do you have a sense of how much this intervention has affected sales by liquor stores? I mean, obviously, every business has suffered in some ways this year, but has the fact that people can more easily purchase alcohol from restaurants, has this actually materially hurt liquor stores?
So actually, there's been no indication of that. Liquor stores have had a banner year, frankly, because of the pandemic. Now, I'm not going to say that the restaurant policy has helped in any way. I think that's just some other, frankly, things that we've seen because of the pandemic. But frankly, the price point that you're purchasing a drink from a restaurant at, you're talking about a $6 to $10 cocktail, a $4 to $6 individual beer. These aren't price competitive to what you would be finding in a liquor store. So I think the concern by the liquor stores, well, I don't want to sound overly dismissive, they're just fundamentally different transactions and really shouldn't be viewed as competitors because the price points are just so fundamentally different. And frankly, the volume, you're not going to go and buy a 6-pack of beer from a restaurant. You would do that at a liquor store. So I guess the short answer would be no. Yeah, it's not materially impacting business.
All right. Well, so to play devil's advocate here, I think every week I buy a 6-pack from a restaurant, just one around the street. And so here's what the liquor stores have said to us, Liquor Store Association, effectively, is that this isn't necessarily a bad idea, that they like that this went ahead and happened for the pandemic to help restaurants out who obviously were hurting really bad during it, but they'd like to only see this extended for maybe a year or two and then have a broader conversation about what it looks like and whether it's working or not, maybe to stop the 6-packs from being sold to thirsty people like me. Why not just extend it for a little bit and then revisit the issue in a year or two when the pandemic has passed us and we can maybe have clearer eyes about this issue?
Sure. And that's certainly something that I've heard before. So the primary thing that businesses look for when you're opening a business, when you're operating, is stability and predictability. And for us, the restaurants, which are by far and away, beyond question, the most severely impacted industry during this shutdown, The restaurants are frankly reeling at this point, and that's being reflected in the unemployment rate, the number of people that are in this industry that can't be hired on because restaurants can't realistically say, "Oh, I'll have a job for you." So I want to introduce as much certainty as I can into this realm, and passing another 1-2 year long, extension of policy, frankly, doesn't give stability. Secondarily, I think it's a bit of a misnomer to say that we haven't had this larger conversation. I mean, this has been the law on the ground for 10 months. This has been something that we've been talking about. It was discussed when we passed the initial piece of legislation. I've certainly been involved in stakeholder meetings and discussions for the past few months around it. So I just don't think that that's necessarily the most forthcoming, argument against it. And look, I'm sympathetic. If in fact everyone turns into you, Jesse, and buys their 6-packs exclusively from their neighborhood restaurant instead of a liquor store, I'll be the first one to come to the table and to fix that. But the fact of the matter is, from what we've seen, that's not the norm. Most people are preferring to buy their 6-packs at a little bit more reasonable rate from their local liquor store. So I just don't think that. I think that the harms from stripping away the certainty are certainly very real and tangible to existing industry, to restaurants, to people's employment. I think the harms to having it be set indefinitely are much lower. It's from an industry that frankly is doing some of the best business they've ever done in their existence. So I think helping the restaurants to get more certainty in their business, and frankly to remove kind of this loggerhead that we have, not just existing restaurants and keeping them from going bankrupt, but new businesses that are looking to open, they can now incorporate this into their business model when they're thinking about what revenues they want to generate. We may see a trend of restaurants preferring smaller square footage because they're not going to rely as much on a in-service, like an on-premises in-service, and they may be more takeout and to-go oriented. And I want to give them the freedom to make that economic decision in planning going forward and hopefully help the employment situation.
Do we have a sense, focusing a little less on the businesses and more on the consumers, have there been substantial increases in alcohol consumption in Colorado during COVID? And how much of that is simply because people are at home all the time, or is it related to ease of purchasing?
Yeah. So, it is my understanding that there is an increase. I don't know exactly how to quantify it. Certainly anecdotally, I've heard that alcohol purchases up across the state, as are some other recreational, mind-altering substances. How much of that is to go from restaurants and how much of that is from your traditional liquor stores, I've not delved into that data yet. But it is certainly something that we're seeing across the state. There is a increase in at least financial transactions around liquor, which I would assume would correlate to consumption.
Talk a little bit about what hurdles do you think you're going to run into beyond the liquor store industry? Do you think that you'll have enough votes? First of all, they're powerful, right? I mean, this is not a lackadaisical, or for lack of a better word, lobby at the legislature. Do you think you'll be able to get this through the Senate? I've heard some concerns about passage over there.
Yeah, I think we will. Frankly, I mean, we've got a great, bipartisan team. Myself and Prilla as Republicans, Jeff Bridges, Dylan Roberts. So I think it's a pretty broad and diverse coalition. So hopefully we'll be able to get it done. I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to get it passed. I think it's frankly, at this time, people are aware of the fact that the restaurants are hurting. They're also aware, I mean, not just the business owner component, but the thing I always harp on is, Colorado is one of the worst unemployment rates. We're the third highest unemployment rate in the nation right now, which is even more startling when you contrast that to the fact that we had one of the lowest unemployment rates right before the COVID shutdown. And when you really segment it, it is that, retail-oriented segment of the population that is that highest. That's the reason for that high unemployment. It's the people that worked in food service, the people that worked in, retail forward, that kind of generally lower skilled segments of the economy. So we really need to get those businesses back to stability and back to hiring. And I think that's a major crux of this bill, is that this will give stability and a new path forward for restaurants to become economically viable again, and hopefully be able to start hiring folks back. So I think that, I'm certainly very much aware of all the unemployment taking place in my district. I know that my colleagues are on both sides of the aisle. And I think that's going to be a powerful motivator behind supporting this bill. So I think we'll get it done. But, we'll see. This is my third year. I like to think I'm pretty good at the job by now, but I've certainly lost a few bills in my time. So I don't think this will be one of them.
All right, well, let me ask you one quick question because I want to get to Representative Herod, but one of the readers asked about, and this is appropriate for you since you're a restaurant owner, about the ban on plastics and styrofoam that's being presented, single-use ones. Do you think that that's dangerous? This is our reader's question. Do you think that's dangerous for restaurants right now that are struggling through the financial realities of the pandemic? Do you support that?
It's ludicrous, frankly, to me that we would be considering that in the middle of financial disaster that we're currently in, our economic situation. This is one of the most ill-advised pieces of legislation I've seen. There's so many reasons why this is a bad idea. Not least amongst them is that, frankly, it's discriminatory. I actually have patrons of my coffee shop who have ALS, and they cannot drink out of anything other than a plastic straw. I have patrons who are intellectually, developmentally disabled, not to mention just children, where trying to drink out of a paper straw or removing these things are, either prohibiting them from participating or, frankly, causing a mess, that sort of thing. And then you go further onto that, the economics behind purchasing some of these compostable products, definitely cuts into margins. I could probably talk about this for an hour, but the short answer is, this is a bad piece of legislation before the COVID. The fact that we're considering it in the middle of this just speaks to how tone deaf some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are when it comes to economic issues.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. I know there'll be a lot of debate at the Capitol, but thank you again, Representative Larson. We appreciate you joining us tonight, and we're going to move forward now. So next up, we have Representative Leslie Herod, a Denver Democrat, who's presenting her big idea. Obviously, a familiar face of the Capitol and someone who's worked on a lot of these big issues. And I know you'll be stirring things up at the Capitol this year with a lot of big policies. So we're excited to hear your big idea. So the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm State Representative Leslie Herod. I represent House District 8 in Central and Northeast Denver. And here's my big idea. So go on a journey with me. Imagine that you are 21, which is a little bit of a while ago for me, but you just turned 21 and you are excited for this milestone. You finally done it and you can buy a beer, but guess what? You don't want to. You don't drink. And in fact, you live with your mom and your brother and your sisters, and you are just barely getting by. You work 2 jobs to help your mom pay bills. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and things just aren't quite working out. So you don't want birthday presents. You don't want really to celebrate. All you want to do is hang out with your family and maybe have enough money left over at the end of the week to treat your brother and sister to a Happy Meal. But your mom, well, she has a different idea. She is not going to let you let this milestone go by. She pulls together her money and has secretly been saving and has pulled together $100. She is so excited to take you up to Cripple Creek and enjoy your 21st birthday. That is a day of fun on the nickel machines, right? And so with gas money. And so you guys go up and you play. You play the nickel machines. You're actually having a great time, and you're starting to get lucky. You're starting to hit. You actually hit like $25. You're super excited and you decide you don't want to press your luck. At least not on that machine. So you go to the next machine and you start playing there. And as luck would have it, there was $12 left in that machine. Holy moly. And you play that and you hit $60. Now it's time to go. You realize that you're pushing it a little bit too much. It's time to take your winnings and leave because you've got that money to take your brothers and sisters out for that Happy Meal. Pretty excited. Things are looking up for you on your 21st birthday. As you walk out with your chest all up, you're super excited. All of a sudden, you're surrounded by security and police officers. You are told that that money you played out of that machine meant that you committed a crime and that you were going to go to jail. Now, you had no idea that this was even a crime. You offered to pay the money back, in fact, to give back your winnings just so you could go home. They wouldn't let you. So remember, you are up from Colorado Springs, you're up at Cripple Creek. It takes a while to get up there. Someone picks you up the next day because you spent the night in jail, and you have to go back up to pay your fines and fees and to pay off that ticket. It's hundreds of dollars. You've got 2 weeks to pay it. So you work hard, you borrow, you pull the money together. You might even have to pawn some things, and you head back up to pay your fines and fees, to pay your ticket, so you can have this off your record. You've never been in trouble before, so that you can have this off your record, and then only to find out that the day you go, which is the last day you could pay, the collections was closed. You could only go 3 days a week, and you picked the wrong day. You had no idea. You go back home, and they say you can do it a different day, but you have to pay more fines and fees. At the end of this ordeal, they also tell you they have taken your driver's license for failure to pay your fines and fees, but you can pay it next week in person, but you don't have a driver's license. So how are you going to get there? Your mom is working during the time that you have to be there. Remember, it's about an hour away. Your mom works 9 to 5. She can't take you up. Your friends can't take you up. You have a decision to make. You either get in the car and drive up from Colorado Springs to Cripple Creek to pay that fine and fee, to make sure your debt is paid and clear, or you might even get a warrant and you will obviously not be able to pay. What do you do? Now, unfortunately, you make the decision, which a lot of people have to make. You decide to drive. You've never gotten a ticket in your life, you'll be fine. Drive up there, and of course, you get pulled over. You're arrested again because you're driving without a driver's license. Now, this is a cycle of not being able to pay fines and fees, losing your driver's license, ending up in court, ending up in jail, maybe for a night or two, and then continually having to pay back. You're thousands of dollars behind. I tell you this story, and I ask you to imagine this with me because this is actually a true story. I took some liberties and to allow for the privacy of the person I'm speaking of, but this has actually happened in Colorado. So my big idea is actually to say that you cannot take someone's driver's license away for failure to pay fines and fees for a non-driver's license related offense so that they can pay their fines and fees. Now, this idea has been around for a while. In fact, it's been adopted in multiple states, conservative and progressive, because the fact is, if a county or a state wants to collect their fines and fees, they need to make sure that people can get to work and get to whatever place they need to go to pay their fines and fees. Now, I will say that this bill has been introduced in legislature before, but it has not passed. But this year is different. Why? Enter the Colorado State Patrol. Colorado State Patrol has brought another argument to the case of ending fines and fees for non-driver's license related offenses. It's because it is unsafe for our communities because people choose that same decision of driving as opposed to not. And it has led to folks being uninsured motorists on the road and unlicensed motorists on the road. So let me give you some numbers. In the last year, according to the Colorado State Patrol, there have been 99,000 actions to suspend or take away someone's driver's license. And our bill, specifically for non-driver's license related offenses, would remove that so that these folks still have their driver's license. But I want to tell you, only 18,000 of these 99,000 people have actually paid their reinstatement fee, which means that around 80,000 people are driving without their driver's license in Colorado right now because of this law. So what we want to do is take away this, I think, this cycle of having to pay your fines and fees or lose your driver's license. Instead, hold people accountable for what they do, ensure that they pay their fines and fees, but allow them the opportunity to get to work, to take care of their family, to take their children to school, and to be insured motorists on the roads. That is my big idea. I am so glad to partner with the Colorado State Patrol on this effort and so many others, and I hope to have people's support.
So the Colorado State Patrol, that's a huge endorsement for your bill. So you're expecting them to be behind this, to be in favor of the legislation when you presented this year.
Absolutely. They are 100% behind it. In fact, they came to me and said, we've got to do this year. We have too many uninsured motorists on the road, and this 99,000 people who don't have their license, and the 88,000 folks who don't have it for these reasons, we need to make sure that they have their license and keep them insured.
So can you talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned this bill's come up before, it was brought last year, and I believe, if I'm right, it died because of the pandemic and not for reasons related to legislation. But what are the main hurdles that you see in passing this legislation here in 2021? And also, this was put in place for a reason, right? To hold people accountable for their fines. How do you, I guess, backfill if it's not driver's licenses? What do you do to make sure that people are held responsible for these things?
Well, there are many other things that our system can do to ensure that people pay their fines and fees. Studies have shown is that people just want to pay them. They want to be done with it. They do, especially, majority of people just want to have these fines and fees paid. They don't want to go into collections. They don't want any further action taken against them. They want it to be done. And so we have found that the revocation of driver's license, the taking away of someone's driver's license, doesn't actually increase their willingness to pay, but what it actually does is decrease their ability to pay.
Thank you, Representative Herod. I was hoping to just ask another question just about some of the numbers involved here. Do you have a sense of how many people are affected by these rules as they currently exist? Like how many people each year will lose their license because of outstanding fees or something else? And how many people your proposal would affect?
Yeah. So if you take away, right, the losing your driver's license for a DUI or for having too many points against your driver's license, we're at that almost 100,000 people a year, according to the Colorado State Patrol and the Department of Revenue. So it would affect quite a large sum of people. And what they're saying is that they believe, this is State Patrol, believes that about 75% of those folks are still driving, and they're driving under suspension.
All right, well, we don't have any questions for you from our readers, but there was one reader who said that they really liked your idea. So I know this will be an interesting one at the Capitol, and thank you again so much for joining us. And we're excited to learn more about and see how it goes.
Thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
All right, well, next up, we have Senate Minority Leader Chris Holbert, who's a Republican from Douglas County, top guy at the Capitol, and we're excited to hear your big idea. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Jesse. Over the past 11 months, the people of Colorado have reached out to legislators and asked very reasonable questions like, why did we decide to limit restaurant capacity a certain percentage? Or why did we decide to allow hair salons to open at 50% of their posted capacity, or 10 people, whichever is less? And it's been a labor to explain to people that the legislature didn't make those decisions. It's been an opportunity to revisit the history of Colorado. The people of Colorado in November 1988 voted to convert a full-time year-round legislature into a part-time, I call it seasonal citizen legislature. So the four legislators who are with us tonight, myself and the three others, we have the power of our elected office effectively for only 4 months each year. And during this pandemic, people have asked questions, well, why did the legislature decide to do this or that? And very often the answer has been, we didn't, we weren't involved in that. People are asking about vaccine distribution, not here to point fingers or criticize, but the legislature didn't decide the vaccine distribution system that we have. Those decisions have been made by the governor. I would disclose that this idea is not about our current pandemic, the current emergency disaster that we're confronted with. It's not about criticizing Governor Polis, but it is trying to use the lessons of the past 11 months, and it looks like it'll go beyond a year. When this happens again, should the state legislature be called back, whether it's after 30 days or 90 days or 6 months, for 8 months a year, we're not at the Capitol. For 8 months a year, we don't have power. And again, not to criticize Governor Polis or his administration as the decisions that they've made. There have been over 300 executive orders. Our caucus thinks that it's important that we use these lessons of the past 11 months and look at either constitutional questions that we might refer to the voters in November of 22 or statutory changes the legislature could make. But in the next prolonged disaster emergency, whatever that might be, should the legislature come back, one, to review executive orders? The legislature grants authority to the executive branch, different agencies, to make rules on different regulated professions. And we have the rule review bill every year to look at all of those rules created by the executive branch. And sometimes we decide that the executive branch went beyond its authority. Other times, most times, we find that the rules are within their authority. Should the legislature have that opportunity on executive orders? That's one question. And then the other fundamental question is, in the future, if we go through a prolonged disaster emergency again, should the legislature come back and share some role of agreeing to extend the disaster emergency, or again, reviewing the decisions that have been made? This, again, is not about Governor Polis. It's about a response to constituents who have asked, where are you? Where is my state senator? What are you doing? It seems like you're not doing anything. And the reality is the people in Colorado in 1988 decided that the legislature couldn't do anything effectively 8 months a year. The governor can call us in for a special session, but the only things we can do must be identified within his call. And the legislature since 1876 has had the opportunity to call its own special session. I believe that's never happened, but it requires 2/3 of both chambers to agree to come back. And it seems like that's probably unlikely to happen, even more so since the vote of the people in 1988 to say that they really preferred a part-time citizen legislature. For us to come back, call our own special session, I think in the eyes of some voters would mean that we know better than the voters, and that's probably a precarious place for a part-time citizen legislator to be. So we hope that the majority parties, a majority party in both chambers, will be open to having this conversation. How long should the governor be able to prolong a disaster emergency? Right now, he can continue this current declared emergency 30 days at a time indefinitely. And again, we're not interested in criticizing him for how he's managed the COVID-19 pandemic, but looking ahead to the future and using the lessons of the past 11 months, should there be some change so that there could be at least two branches of government at some point participating in those decisions.
Senator Holbert, thank you for that presentation. Thanks for joining us tonight. I was hoping to press you for just a little bit of context on this. Do you have a sense of, does Governor Polis have emergency powers that are greater than those of other states' governors? And are there other states with some sort of legislative review process for governor's emergency powers?
The answer answer it in reverse order. States are different, and the scenarios are across the board. I wouldn't say that there's 50 different versions of it, but there aren't one or two. Colorado was unique, and we became a territory in 1861, a state in 1876. And since the very beginning, we had this unique thing called local control written into our state constitution, as I understand it from Ken Burns' great series, The West. If you watch the last couple of episodes there, it talks about the motivations of people moving west after the Civil War and the desire to be out from under a centralized top-down control of a governor and or a state legislature that was probably more common in states to the east of us, the original 13 or those that came before Colorado. That was a very common motivation among people who were moving to places like this new territory called Colorado. So our governor, to answer the first part of your question, our governor in my own vernacular is maybe something similar to what we say about some mayors, or we have weak mayors and strong mayors. Our governor doesn't have the authority. I'm not an attorney, but I think a layperson description is our governor doesn't have the authority to make law or nullify or ignore law through executive order during normal times. The governor must administer the executive branch according to the laws that are written by the state legislature. And again, I'm not here to criticize Governor Polis or any of his predecessors as to whether they did a good job or bad. During a declared disaster emergency, that changes. And our governor assumes a great deal of authority. And I think a lot of that is transition from maybe the traditional branch of the legislature, and not here to suggest that we should have more chefs in the kitchen, more chiefs or whatever during an emergency. But again, the response from the people of, gosh, we only have a legislature for 4 months a year, and this has gone on for 11 months. Where is the separation of powers? Where's the balance of government? And I just want to reiterate, this isn't a critique of how Governor Polis has managed the pandemic. He and I think we have all learned a tremendous amount during this pandemic, and hopefully we can use these lessons to make better policy for the future.
So the legislature does, though, have a mechanism through which to end the cycle of emergency declarations, right? I mean, if there's a 2/3 vote to call the special session, you all can come back. And I think that what Democrats, I guess, why isn't that enough? And then also Democrats oftentimes will point out that, and I think the governor pointed out this evening, that in times of an emergency declaration, there often isn't time to call the legislature back and to make this decision every 30 days, as some of your colleagues I know have proposed would happen in the future.
I would say during the past 11 months that I would have been reluctant to embrace the idea of bringing back the legislature for a 30-day time frame, or every 30 days. Right now, the governor can continue this declared disaster emergency 30 days at a time. And I think where the conversation has turned since last May or June is, okay, yeah, 30 days even in my mind was too frequent. But what about 90 days? What about 6 months? Should there be some point that the other branch, the legislative branch, is brought back? In a state where the legislature meets year round, I think California is that way. I'm sure other states are that way. That probably isn't a concern. The legislature is there, but this is an important discussion because we've heard from so many constituents who assume that the legislature is participate in making these kinds of decisions, and they're often shocked to learn that that just simply isn't true. So at what point should we provide those constituents, the people of Colorado, some balance? And I certainly understand the concerns. I'm not looking to interfere with the decision-making power of one person in an emergency. That would seem precarious, but at some point, should the lawmakers, should the legislative branch have an opportunity to review the decisions, maybe modify some of those decisions? I think of the hair salons at 50% of occupancy, or 10%, or 10 people, whichever is less. Hair salons are not all created equal. There's 2-chair or maybe even 1-chair sort of barbershops, old style barbershops, and now there's big hair salons that have private rooms. Why are we treating them all in exactly under the same restriction? It doesn't seem to be what we're doing with restaurants. 25 or 50% capacity based on the size of the restaurant allows some flexibility. We're not saying or 10, whichever is less. So I don't want to dwell too much on that, but either a rule review opportunity or to have the legislature come back and say, yes, we agree. And I think through the summer, when we saw COVID increasing, I would have been hard pressed to vote against, or vote for ending the pandemic or the declared disaster emergency to support 30 days or 60 or 90. But would it have helped for the people to see the legislature come back and say, yes, we agree, maybe modify some of these decisions, these executive orders, but yes, we agree with continuing it. I think that's probably what would have happened.
and I know you're kind of the guy on history of the Capitol, so we have two reader questions that I think are related, and I'll ask you this, and then we'll move on to Senator Gonzalez. But the questions are, back in '88, as you mentioned, the decision was made to move the legislature to part-time. Can you talk about why that is, and also, yeah, I mean, can you talk a little bit about the history of that and why it's a good thing and maybe why it's a bad thing, if you think it's
There were
a bad thing?
several really significant decisions made by voters in '88 through, I think, '92, '94. At the end of it, it was term limits. We have people who demand term limits, and I have to explain, well, we've had those. The people decided that in '94, and even back then, excuse me, if it was either '92 or '94, I believe the final decision was '94, but that even included the members of Congress from Colorado, and the US Supreme Court, a year after it passed, ruled that that was unconstitutional, that it created two classes of federal legislators. But at the state level, at the county and municipal level, we've had term limits. Back in '88, the voters approved this 120-day session limit. And on the surface, it appears just as sort of limited a calendar at the Capitol, no more than 120 days. Okay, but what it really did is it eliminated what we refer to as pocket veto. Once a bill's introduced, it transitioned into the gavel amendment. They were both on the ballot, I think, in '88, but there's so many changes that have occurred to our state legislature that it really is unique. It's not like Congress in Washington, D.C., and it's really unlike most other state legislatures. The people made these decisions, I think, generally because they wanted to limit the growth of government and specifically the power of the legislative branch. We see hundreds and hundreds of bills, 600, maybe 650 bills in a 120-day session. The reason is there's a limited amount of time, and we have committee hearings that run all night. People ask, why do you do that? Well, if we were running for 6 months a year or 12 months a year, we wouldn't need to do that, but we need to get our time, get our work done in those 120 days. Last spring, the state Supreme Court ruled that during a declared disaster emergency, that we don't have to count those days consecutively. When we're not under a declared disaster emergency, we start on usually a Wednesday in January, and all the weekend days and holidays, everything counts. And then at or before midnight on the 120th day, 119 days after the day we start, we have to end. The legislature cannot extend that timeline. In a lot of states that limit the time, there is a provision for the legislature, the governor, to extend it. That's not an option in Colorado, but the governor can call us back for a special session if he so chooses. So there's a lot of history. I could talk about it for hours, and I'd love to, but I don't want to step on Senator Gonzalez's time because she's a prime co-sponsor on one of my bills, and I don't want to make her mad ever.
That's smart. You don't want to get in the way of Senator Gonzalez. She's I guess I'm glad that there's only 650 bills, but I'm not a huge fan of the all-night legislative hearings. So I see that.
And hearing that a committee got done at 4:30, and it's like, wow. Yeah, wow.
Yes, yeah. Well, I haven't done one of those all-night hearings in a while, and I'm not looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Minority Leader. We appreciate it, and thank you for the bit of the history and for sharing your thoughts with us and your big idea. Well, next up, I see Senator Gonzalez popped in for a second. Senator Gonzalez is a Denver Democrat here. She's in her 3rd year as a senator, and we're excited to hear your big idea. So the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Minority Leader Holbert, always great to work with you, and always great to learn the history, more about the history of how we got to where we're at now. It's in that vein that I'm actually very interested in protecting Coloradans' personal identifying information. And how we got to this point is really rooted in a lot of recent legislative history. In 2013, Colorado passed SB 251, which is a bill that created access to driver's licenses for all Coloradans, regardless of their immigration status. That same year, Colorado passed the Colorado Asset Bill, which allowed Colorado high school graduates the ability to attend Colorado colleges and universities and pay in-state tuition, regardless of their immigration status. Those two policies were really, it was a pact with the immigrant community saying, trust us. If you come forward and if you share your information, we will protect it, but we will also allow you to be a more full member of our state level society. And you know what? Tens of thousands of Coloradans came forward and proactively applied for driver's licenses, proactively utilized Colorado Asset to further their education, Dreamers and their family members. But unfortunately, what we've seen is that trust has been broken. In May of 2020, the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition submitted a CORA request that uncovered what community advocates across the state had long held suspicion around, that there was a pervasive culture of collaboration between state agencies and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement under the Trump administration. We saw hundreds of instances of collaboration between agencies such as DMV officials with ICE agents, but across many state agencies. And so that's really, those emails were actually collected from 2018 to 2020, and really helped spur the creation of Governor Polis's guidance to state agencies to clarify the protection of Coloradans' personal identifying information and the ways in which that information could or could not be utilized for civil immigration enforcement purposes. We've seen, though, in the midst of this pandemic, where fear and anxiety in the midst of crisis, where those emotions have become overriding factors, that we as a state need to do more to rebuild that broken trust and to restore that trust within the immigrant community. Why? Because in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of the economic crisis, where tens of thousands of US citizen children in mixed status families are going hungry, worried about whether they're going to be able to make their next rent payment, and how they're going to continue to participate in school, in community. We as a state, we need to rebuild and regain that trust. And so this legislative session, I am proud to work alongside Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez and a broad coalition of immigrant-led and immigrant-serving organizations to bring forward a policy to protect Coloradans' personal identifying information that is submitted to state agencies, and how that can then be utilized by for civil immigration enforcement purposes. Specifically, you know, in the instance where ICE wants to obtain an individual's personal identifying information, that's fine. Go to court and get a warrant, just like any other judicial law enforcement agency. ICE has long utilized these, I call them wannabe warrants. They're administrative warrants, since ICE is a administrative agency, the federal level, to try and seek this personal identifying information. Those practices need to stop, and especially now where there is so much need and so much fear in the community. that is the work ahead for us in the state to restore that trust and to ensure that every Coloradan feels safe and feels confident in being able to access the resources and the services that they need for themselves and for their families. That's my idea.
Yeah, so I know we talked about this last session, and it was something that kind of fell to the wayside along the lines of things that got left in the cutting room floor because of the pandemic. And this issue is really interesting because when people might remember that when New York tried to do this, the Trump administration responded by shutting down people, I think it was like global entry applications for New Yorkers and maybe like pre-check. And I know when we had talked last year that there was the fear that maybe this would happen in Colorado too. But now with this executive order from the governor and with the Biden administration, talk about why you think this is necessary. I mean, are you afraid that the next governor of Colorado might do away with it? Are you afraid that the Biden administration might pursue that information in the same way that the Trump administration did?
You know, I am grateful to the governor for having taken the step to issue guidance in the midst of the pandemic, right? It was an important step forward to acknowledge the harm that had been caused. And this policy is really to concretize and to strengthen those good government principles, right? This idea that if I give my information to the state should protect that information, I think is one that is widely accepted. I don't think that should be a controversial idea, right? And quite frankly, I'm also excited by the fact that we have a new president, and hopefully the Biden administration will steer ICE in a different direction. ICE currently, though, is utilizing state and local governments as a force multiplier in order to detain and deport as many human beings as possible. And that practice has led to communities, the vast majority of whom immigrant communities living in mixed status families, meaning maybe there's an undocumented mom, lawful permanent resident dad, and 3 U.S. citizen kids, right? That makes all of us less safe when those mixed status families begin to withdraw from society and begin to withdraw from community. Now, we've seen this play out in some pretty direct ways, right? Where undocumented Coloradans who also find themselves contributing to the economy and very much working on the front lines of the pandemic, falling sick and dying from COVID, along with other Latinos and people of color and low-income communities at higher and far disproportionate rates. And so as we rebuild, as we recover from this pandemic, we have to restore that trust.
Senator, thank you for this presentation. I was hoping to ask you, even if the state refuses to provide this information to federal agencies, could ICE or some other federal agency essentially compel the information? Is there a way that they can extract it whether or not the state wants to provide it?
You know, they can certainly go to court, just like any other law enforcement agency, and obtain a warrant signed by a judge, as opposed to what ICE's current practice has been, which is these wannabe warrants, these administrative warrants, which is ICE has reason to believe that Julie Gonzalez is deportable, signed ICE. That's like me signing a document that says Julie Gonzalez is queen of the world, signed Julie Gonzalez. Like, go to a court of law, present the information to a judge, and get a warrant just like any other law enforcement official. It shouldn't be that hard. And quite frankly, I think that ICE, if you asked any other law enforcement official if they would utilize that burden of proof in before going to a judge, they would laugh, right? It shouldn't be that difficult.
And one last question to you, and I want to respect your time, but immigration can be a very divisive topic at the Capitol. Do you think you'll be able to win any Republican support for this bill? Do you have any Republicans in the wings who you think will sign on?
You know, what I have been really honored to do in my work at the Capitol is to find points of agreement. You know, we don't always, you know, my side, my team, Team Blue and Team Red, we don't always agree on everything. But you know what we do agree on is protecting Coloradans' private information, right, from government overreach, and we have been able to earn Republican support on immigration bills in the past, and I look forward to having that conversation with my Republican colleagues because I think that this is, at the end of the day, this is about the state's obligation to maintain private information private. And I think that that's an idea that we can all get behind.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it so much, Senator, for joining us tonight. And thank you to all 4 of our lawmaker panelists and to Governor Jared Polis for joining us. I'm getting tired thinking about all the things that we're going to be covering this session. I think it'll be another interesting year down at the Capitol. Thanks again so much to Aponte and Bussam for the public affairs consultants for sponsoring tonight's event. Again, thanks to the governor, thanks to the lawmakers. Finally, a special thanks, of course, to Seth Maskett and the Center on American Politics at the University of Denver for being such great partners to the Sun. We really appreciate all of you coming out to join us. If you want to support these kind of events, if you want to support the kind of journalism the Colorado Sun does, please join us at coloradosun.com/join. You can become a member for as little as $5 a month and help make more events like this possible. We love shining light on issues for our community and digging into stuff, even when we make some of our lawmaker friends angry at the same time. So we look forward to holding more of these events. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to us. And thanks again. Have a safe night. Be safe and have a great rest of your year.